Take 15, I think. A maelstrom of violence and aggression fueled by a drug and alcohol-sodden haze of overall acting out. A sports figure of legendary status approaching his own death. He's well on the horizon, recruits a sports writer to write the story of his life that he imagines will be overall heroic before it's too late. The journalist takes the job, hoping to create something great and something legendary to escape the cacophony and noise and problems of his own life, and together they spiral down in an epic, going through an epic adventure together of utter insanity. This is Robert Wuhl as Al Stump, Tommy Lee Jones as the legendary Ty Cobb, 1994's film Cobb. I'm going to attempt to do the impossible and talk about the movie. I say that because there's so much out there about Al Stump's original biography of the man, how he redacted it later, and he came out and exposed all these negative things about him and all of the mixed feelings, observations, questions. It isn't entirely clear. At the end of the day, taking in and weighing all the testimony of different people who knew him and family and friends, there's not a clear picture of Ty Cobb. The picture that we get of him in the film and from a lot of historians as this very grotesque and hateful, bigoted figure does not come out and bear out reality. But I also came across a great clip of Siskel and Ebert at the movies where I thought they were going to punch each other out over this movie. I don't know enough to get into the history, but I want to talk about the film. The film Cobb is an incredible piece of art in and of itself, regardless of how much it resembles the real figure, to the degree that you know about it and can put it aside. The Ty Cobb that we get in the movie is obsessed with his own greatness, but we also get little bits and pieces of his life. And a big part of the story arc is the level of honesty that he has with his biographer as he's telling him his story. Because, for example, the very formative part of his life story, the death of his father, killed by an intruder, killed by his wife by accident, killed by his wife's lover having stumbled upon them in the deed. At each time the story is revealed, more is of the truth is told. At least that's how it appears. So beginning with this childhood or this youth trauma, he's a young man when this happens. He's not long before going off to the Detroit Tigers, but he's still in his late teens. And this relationship with his parents that is so defining to his life, the fact that his parents were together, they were married when his mother was 12, the affairs, the cheating, the killing, his having to testify in court as a young man and not exposing what was going on with his mother, lest suspicion be cast on her or negative views be cast upon her and seen in a negative light. This sort of thing goes with someone and carries with them, and it's a major part of the story arc, the lifetime character arc of the figure in the movie. The other major part of the story that we get is the idea of not accommodating people. This is a major thing with the character of Ty Cobb in the film from beginning to end. Not to adjust your life, your reactions, your doing, almost a very negative view of cultural norms in that sense, but that you should be doing what accommodates you. And again, going back to, it seems, having grown up with a father who was a prominent figure, that you're in the public light, you have to behave a certain way. The idea that in that sort of Southern Georgian culture he comes from, defending his mother's honor, this idea of protecting yourself by doing that which is appropriate. What has happened is his legendary sort of baseball fame, becoming a public figure, becoming someone that is influential enough to get away with a lot of stuff. he has fallen into this mindset of never accommodate other people. Don't do it because you're supposed to. Don't obey those rules just because they're there. Don't obey the norms of society just because they're there, or relationships or marriage or family. And that sort of brings together across the storyline why he ends up in the film being a rotten human being, a rotten parent, a rotten husband, a rotten guy. A lot of the myths of real history that are said to be false are in the movie, but again, we do get in the film a character of Ty Cobb who sharpens his spikes, uses a lot of racial epithets, can be immediately and overwhelmingly aggressive for no reason, and it's like watching something grotesque that you can't turn away from. And ultimately, this is what works with the film. You have the great historic figure and the image thereof that many of us who didn't even know baseball had heard the name, and therefore it invokes something for the purposes of the film, that now seeing this grotesque version of this individual and what they've become, and in some respect what they always were, or what life made them quite young, it becomes this artwork of blood splatter where you look at it and it's the Rorschach thing in blood, you trying to decipher what exactly is going on, and yet it moves from moment to moment, where every time you think he's going to switch and do something outstanding, he does something quite crazy. We get to see, apparently, Louis Prima and Keely Smith, at least the people playing them, look very much like them, get him up on stage and they ask him to say a few things, and he immediately begins to alienate people by his racial terminology and the way that he speaks. These moments where we expect that he's going to suddenly shine and leave us more confused, he actually degenerates further and makes us more confused. Ultimately, you get the sense, though, by the time the film reaches its end, that he is as much a victim of the world as he has left a world full of his own victims. That he set down this course at a very young age because of things which beset him and scarred him. The conscious then decision to not accommodate others, and encourages his writer and others in the story to stop accommodating people. He says, you're accommodating me, I don't accommodate people, you shouldn't be accommodating people. And it really drives home this idea of he's not trying to browbeat people into submission, he's wanting people to resist. In some fashion, the lesson he wants them to learn is the lesson of not do it just because you're being bullied, whether he's the one that's bullying you, waving his gun around, shooting up his booze, shooting up his stuff in his syringe, his various kinds of drugs, hitting the booze, whatever he's doing and however outrageous he is, not to be afraid of him and not to accommodate your life around it. Ultimately, learning that lesson is probably what drove away his wives, his kids, and so many people around him. And yet, we get a soft-hearted individual at times who gives out of his own pocket to support other ball players who have had it worse. One took a fastball to the head, is the story, and is relatively destitute, can't pull himself out of the bottle long enough to be functional, and is essentially taken care of financially in this nursemaid sort of way by the character of Cobb. And even when he is going around, based on sort of those popular legends, using a lot of racial epithets and being very hostile, you never actually get the sense within the film that he is a racist. The way that word is thrown around today, it means everything and nothing, so I don't know how to say it. But you never get the sense that he ideologically believes that certain people are inferior to him. Rather, the sense you get is that he likes being a colossal a-hole to people. And if people happen to be people of color, that is a unique way that you can be an a-hole to them. You know, it's like that's the button to push at the times. Those are people he's wanting to push their buttons. But we never get any sort of detailed sense that he even grasps the Darwinian notions of racial evolution and superiority and inferiority, or he's not a guy who's going to talk about the differences between Homo sapiens and Denisovan man. And like, this is not an ideological racist. You don't actually get that sense. But he's the guy that if you're driving, you're driving in a way he doesn't like, he's going to yell something out the window at you. And if you happen to be black, that's going to define what he yells out the window at you. That doesn't mean that inside he's consciously, actively, continually identifying people in this way. But we do get what a film it is. You do definitely get the sense of being in the middle of the chaos and the maelstrom, like you've been pulled in along with the writer, which obviously the writer is meant to be our stand-in. You're pulled into this chaos. You are very quickly at the beginning of the film veering down slippery, snowy roads and getting random flashbacks of his life. And it ends up being a much more artistically amazing story than it is a biography. And I referenced, you can find the clip of Siskel and Ebert almost punching each other out over this. They used to like to argue, but I found that clip and I was like, that's amazing. They're like really worked up about this, because the things that popular media have accused Ty Cobb of being, and the things that he allegedly did, which are not verifiable, no evidence, but these are very divisive things. Even back in the 90s when this film came out, when the book came out, when the first book came out, as these stories have circulated, there's enough to them that they're not like, oh, he cheated on his wife or he was mean to his. They're much more drastic. Left a man for dead in Detroit, intentionally scarred people by sharpening his spikes. I mean, it's hard to find anyone that's down the middle on these issues, because you believe these legends and he was just a horrible bastard, or you don't believe the legends and he's a human being who's not perfect, but still can be this heroic figure despite his flaws. The film, my opinion, seems to want to tackle many of those legends by bringing it in, but at the same time, it really wanted to leave us with the confusion of this man is a troubled human who has weaknesses. He's not as bad as all that, but there's a little bit of, some of that's not too far from, but we want to see him as a human. And really, that's what a good biography does, and it is what a good film does with a protagonist, where you're clearly trying to give us insight. Maybe because I just recently had seen it, I was thinking of the film Joker, right? Completely different genre, completely not historical figures, completely not, and yet it felt like we were meant to get a window into the character of Cobb in the film that would allow us to empathize with, or at least grasp the humanity of him, despite the caricature that is out there concerning him. All in all, I thought it was an amazingly entertaining movie. I highly recommended to me by some friends, although it's disturbing enough that I'm not sure it's something that I will watch a bunch of times. It was really good film. It was worth watching, but it's, you got to be in just the right mindset. And having never seen it, the real benefit I think that I got from watching it was the shock value, was seeing those things the first time is something that will not ever be able to be replicated, obviously. And boy, that was something. But I really enjoyed it. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. If not, go catch it and let me know. Cobb.